Have you ever noticed that the wisest people in the room often say the least? What if the real sign of intelligence wasn't how much you know, but how little you need to say? Today's video will challenge the way you communicate and the way others perceive your strength in silence. Hui, welcome to Bright Stoicism. I'm truly glad you're here, because what we're about to discuss could shift the way you see yourself and the way the world sees you. You might think intelligence is all about knowledge, sharp facts, and quick answers, but true intelligence, it's often silent. There's a secret that truly intelligent men carry with them, like a hidden compass guiding their actions. And no, it's not knowing the capital of every country or winning every debate. Their power lies elsewhere, in restraint, in the ability to hold back words, to master silence. You see, what you choose not to say often speaks louder than any witty comeback. In fact, I've spent years observing this dynamic through the lens of ancient Stoic wisdom and over way too many cups of coffee, quietly watching people and conversations unfold in real life. Time and again, one truth keeps surfacing. The wisest men, they don't rush to fill the silence. They don't toss around empty words to prove a point. They don't damage their credibility with careless chatter. That's not because they think they're perfect. Far from it. It's because they've learned, often the hard way, that some phrases, once spoken, do more harm than good. And they've learned that staying silent is sometimes the boldest move in the room. So today, we're going to dive deep into 7 things intelligent men never say, not because they're flawless, but because they figured out that certain phrases are traps, dead ends. And letting go of them, that's where true growth begins. Before we jump in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join our growing tribe of thinkers. Let's get wiser together. Number 1, I already know that. Now here's a phrase that slips out way more often than we'd like to admit. I already know that. On the surface, it sounds confident, maybe even smart. But under the surface, it quietly whispers something else entirely. A closed mind. And intelligent men? They understand this. They recognize the danger that hides behind certainty. I remember learning this lesson the hard way. Years ago, I had the privilege of working with a mentor, a man who didn't need to speak much to command respect. He carried himself with quiet strength, the kind that only comes from having faced real-life storms and weathered them all. We were reviewing a process I'd done 100 times before, something I thought I had completely figured out. He began explaining a small detail, probably trying to offer a new perspective. But I cut him off. Yeah, I know that already. He paused, looked at me. Calm, unshaken, but with a heaviness in his eyes that said more than any words ever could. He moved on without correcting me. Later that night, it hit me. I hadn't just interrupted a sentence. I'd shut the door on wisdom. This wasn't about me knowing the steps. It was about what he had seen, lived, and experienced. Lessons that don't come from manuals or training videos. His knowledge was hard-won, and I had robbed myself of the chance to receive it. When we say, I already know that, we're not just ending a conversation. We're declaring, there's nothing left for me to learn. But that's not intelligence. That's arrogance, wearing the mask of confidence. Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Stoic philosophers, saw this trap clearly. He wrote, "You cannot learn anything when you think you already know everything." What he meant was this: the ego, our relentless urge to seem smart, to protect our image, can become our greatest obstacle. And if we're not careful, that ego builds a wall so tall that no new wisdom can get in. So the next time someone offers insight, pause. Listen, be open, because sometimes the smartest thing you can do is say nothing at all. Pride tells us we're standing on solid ground, but often we're just balancing on a fragile ledge of self-importance. Truly intelligent men know knowledge isn't something you win like a trophy and place on a dusty shelf. It's not static. It's alive, moving, changing. It's like a river. Even if you step in the same spot twice, the water's never the same. The current has shifted. The moment is different, and so should your perspective be. I remember once watching a master carpenter, a man with more sawdust in his lungs than most of us have experience in our bones. He stood quietly while a young apprentice eagerly explained a woodworking technique, something the master had no doubt perfected decades ago. But instead of cutting him off, he nodded thoughtfully. He asked questions, listened, even thanked the boy for sharing. Later, curiosity got the best of me. I asked, "Why didn't you just tell him you already knew that?" He smiled, the kind of smile that only time can carve, and said, "Because sometimes you learn more by listening to how someone else sees it." That's wisdom, the kind of intelligence that doesn't need to wear a badge. It doesn't need to shout or prove itself. It's quiet, observant, and powerful. So the next time you hear yourself thinking, "I've heard this before," take a breath. Listen anyway. Not to flatter anyone, but because that one sentence, that subtle shift, that tiny detail might change everything, even if it doesn't. You still win because you practiced humility. You showed respect. You modeled the kind of intelligence that earns trust, not demands it. In Stoic philosophy, we call this self-mastery. It's the quiet strength to put aside ego in favor of clarity. It's the lifelong discipline of being a student of life. And that's the kind of intelligence that never fades. Next, we'll uncover the second phrase that smart men avoid at all costs. And trust me, it's one you've probably heard this week. Stay with me. 2. That's impossible. Let's talk about the second phrase intelligent men never say, because it can quietly poison potential. A few years ago, I worked alongside a man named Robert. Robert was sharp, experienced, the kind of leader who could carry the weight of an entire company without breaking a sweat, or at least that's how it looked. But he had one habit, one phrase that crept into nearly every conversation. That's impossible. Every time someone suggested a bold idea, entering a new market, updating an outdated system, pitching to a high-profile client, his response was always the same. That's impossible. At first, it sounded logical. Responsible, even. Why waste time chasing dreams that seem out of reach? But the more I listened, the more I noticed something deeper. He wasn't talking about the idea. He was revealing his own limits. What he really meant was, "I can't picture how this would work. I'm afraid to try and fail. I've built my world around the familiar, and I don't want to break it." The Stoics knew this all too well. Seneca said, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." And that's exactly what was happening. Robert wasn't analyzing risks. He was projecting his inner fear, fear of the unknown, of failure, of being wrong. It's a quiet fear. It hides behind logic. It dresses itself in caution. But underneath, it's paralyzing. And the worst part, that kind of mindset doesn't just stop you, it stops everyone around you. It sets the ceiling for what's possible and calls it realism. but truly intelligent men. They question that ceiling. They ask, what if? Instead of, that's impossible. They know that progress isn't born from certainty. It's born from courage, from trying, failing, learning. Trying again. So the next time you catch yourself thinking, that's impossible, pause. Ask yourself, is it really, or is it just unfamiliar? Because the door to growth often hides behind discomfort, and behind it is everything you never thought you could achieve. This belief, it's the very thing that keeps us small. It whispers, don't move until you're sure. Wait until the fog clears. But here's the truth. If we wait for perfect clarity, we wait forever. And the Stoics knew this. Their wisdom cuts clean through this kind of hesitation, because the real enemy isn't the obstacle, it's how we see the obstacle. As Marcus Aurelius taught, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. In other words, it's not the challenge that defeats us, it's our perception of the challenge. I've seen this play out in real life. A few years after working with Robert, the man who labeled everything impossible, I found myself on a new project. It was a logistical nightmare. Tight budget, shorter than reasonable deadline, inexperienced team, and a client who wanted results yesterday. Every rational part of me wanted to echo Robert's old phrase, "This can't be done." But instead, I paused. I remembered what the Stoics taught, and I asked a different question. What can I control today? Not the entire outcome. Not 6 months from now, just today. Then I asked, what's the next small step we can take? One step. Then the next, and guess what? That project ended up being one of the most successful I've ever been part of. Not because we were miracle workers, but because we refused to freeze in the face of the challenge. We didn't wait for guarantees. We moved anyway. And Marcus Aurelius said, you have power over your mind, not outside events. And that one line changed everything. When a man says, that's impossible, he's often not describing reality. He's declaring defeat before the fight has even begun. But intelligent men, they think differently. They understand that what feels impossible is often just unfamiliar. They don't see a wall. They see an invitation, a threshold to growth. Because true strength isn't built by winning every fight. It's built by showing up. Again and again, especially when the odds aren't in your favor. That's Stoic courage. Not blind optimism, not hype or slogans, but calm, disciplined persistence. Because life will ask hard things of you, and the moment you label those things impossible, you shut the door on yourself. But the man who takes that next step, even when it's small, even when it's shaky, he unlocks doors that others never even notice. That's not just intelligence. That's wisdom, refined by effort. 3. That's not my fault. And now we reach the third phrase, a sentence that sounds innocent, but carries a quiet poison. That's not my fault. It feels harmless, even fair, especially in moments of stress. When something breaks, at work, in a relationship, in life, our first instinct is often to defend ourselves, to say, hey, I didn't cause this. Don't blame me. But here's the hidden cost. Every time you push responsibility away, you also push away your power. Intelligent men, they've learned this lesson. They know that responsibility isn't the same as blame. It's about influence, about ownership. even if it's only 5% your fault. If you deny that part, you also deny yourself the power to help fix it. Earlier, we uncovered how pushing away responsibility quietly robs us of the power to change our own lives. Now let's look at how that plays out in the real world, and how the smallest shift in mindset can open doors we never knew existed. A friend of mine, Michael, learned this the hard way. He lost a major client, a deal that meant a lot to him, to his career, to his team. And the moment it fell apart, he jumped into defense mode. He listed all the reasons it wasn't his fault. The client was difficult. The market was shifting. His team missed deadlines, and honestly, all of those things were true to a degree. But while Michael was busy building his case, explaining, justifying, defending, something far more important slipped away. The chance to grow. The opportunity to learn. He stayed stuck, trapped in a loop of repetition, making the same decisions, missing the same warning signs. All the while convinced that the problem was always somewhere else. What he didn't realize was this: by refusing to own even a fraction of responsibility, he gave up the one thing that could have truly changed the outcome: his control over himself. The Stoics were crystal clear on this point. Focus only on what you can control. Release the rest. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic teachers, said it best. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. And that, right there, is the key. When we say, "That's not my fault," we hand over the steering wheel. We wait for someone else to make amends, to fix it, to do better next time. But the moment we accept even a sliver of responsibility, we take back control. We go from being stuck to taking initiative, from passive to powerful, from powerless to prepared. In my own life, I've learned this again and again. Every time I've had the courage to own my part, no matter how small, a new door opened. Sometimes it was as simple as saying, "I could have communicated that more clearly. I should have asked more questions. I could have been more prepared." Even if others around me made bigger mistakes, that willingness to take responsibility shifted something inside me. It built self-trust and earned trust from others. It showed them, and myself, that I wasn't waiting to be rescued. I wasn't sitting around hoping to be proven right. I was choosing to lead. Blame is easy. Responsibility? That's hard. But it's also where strength lives. The Stoics remind us, we are not here to escape hardship. We're here to rise above it. And rising begins with one simple question: what can I do differently next time? That's how intelligent men lead, not by pointing fingers, but by lighting a path forward. 4. I don't need any help. Now, let's talk about one of the most dangerous lies a man can tell himself. I don't need any help. Sounds noble, doesn't it? Independent, stoic, strong. It's the image we've been taught to respect. The lone wolf, the self-made man, the silent hero who carries every burden without complaint. But underneath, the truth is far less glamorous. The refusal to ask for help is rarely strength. It's pride. Pride that whispers, "You'll look weak." Pride that says, "You can't trust anyone but yourself." Pride that isolates us, quietly but completely. And worst of all, it convinces us that struggling in silence is a virtue. Previously, we explored how the refusal to ask for help isn't a display of strength. It's often a sign of pride, quietly isolating us. Now let's see what happens when even the greatest among us dare to lean on others, and how that act, far from weakness, is the foundation of true resilience. Pride convinces us we're protecting our strength, but over time, it quietly chips away at the very resilience we think we're guarding. I was reminded of this while reading about one of history's most revered figures, Abraham Lincoln. We often imagine Lincoln as a lone warrior, stoic, silent, burdened by the weight of a fractured nation, the Civil War raging, the Union on the brink, one man standing tall amidst the chaos. But that image, while powerful, is incomplete. What's often overlooked is how deeply Lincoln leaned on others. He didn't lead in isolation. He didn't pretend to have all the answers. Instead, he surrounded himself with advisors, men who didn't always agree with him. He sought out opinions that challenged his own, not because he lacked confidence, but because he had the wisdom to know that true leadership comes from humility. Take the Battle of Antietam, one of the most brutal chapters of the Civil War. Despite serious disagreements, Lincoln personally visited General McClellan. Why? To hear his strategy, to understand his thinking, to find common ground even when trust was frayed. And what about his cabinet? Famously called the team of rivals because Lincoln intentionally filled it with strong personalities, many of whom had once been his political enemies. He welcomed the tension. He valued the clash of ideas because he knew wisdom isn't forged in solitude. It's shaped in conversation, contradiction, and collaboration. That wasn't weakness. It was strength, measured by humility. And that's a lesson intelligent men eventually learn. Self-reliance matters, but it was never meant to be absolute. The Stoics made this point too. Marcus Aurelius, arguably the most powerful man of his time, openly acknowledged the people who shaped him. In Meditations, he didn't list his victories. He listed the lessons he had learned from mentors, from teachers, from friends. He wrote about the values he inherited, the character he admired, the guidance that saved him. Imagine that. The emperor of the Roman Empire, the man who ruled the known world, didn't pretend to have all the answers. So why do we? And still, many of us fall into that trap. We convince ourselves, if I ask for help, I've failed. If I reach out, I've shown weakness. If I lean on someone, I'm not strong enough. But that belief, it's a trap. It locks us inside our own minds. It isolates us when we need connection the most. And worst of all, it robs the people around us of the chance to show up for us. Because when you refuse to ask for help, you don't just suffer alone. You deny others the opportunity to give. You break the cycle of mutual support that binds people together. I've fallen into that trap myself. There was a time in my life when I thought I had to carry it all. Work, family, expectations, that invisible pressure to always hold it together. And so I kept it all inside. Smiled through stress, shouldered everything alone, because I thought that's what strength looked like. But all it did, it wore me down. Until one day, exhausted and overwhelmed, I finally said something out loud. Just one sentence, to one person I trusted. I can't do this by myself. What I received wasn't judgment. It was understanding. It was support. And in that small, simple moment of honesty, I felt lighter, clearer, stronger. The very thing I'd feared, asking for help, turned out to be the thing that restored my strength. Previously, we discovered that strength isn't about silence. It's about the wisdom to ask for help when it's needed. Now let's go deeper. Real strength also means understanding our place within something larger than ourselves. That weak strength isn't about how long you can stand alone. It's about knowing when to reach out, and even more importantly, knowing how to accept a hand when it's offered. The Stoics were never interested in the myth of the lone hero. They taught that we are not islands. We are threads in a larger tapestry, woven together for cooperation, for mutual support, for connection. Epictetus said it clearly. No man is an island. And when we pretend otherwise, we're not just being stubborn. We're resisting the very rhythm of life itself. And strength isn't diminished by asking for help. It's defined by it. Because asking for help takes courage. It requires vulnerability, and it demands honesty, especially with ourselves. And those are the trademarks of an intelligent, wise man. A man who understands that carrying every burden alone isn't noble, it's unnecessary. So next time you feel that internal voice whisper, "I've got this. I don't need anyone," pause. Ask yourself honestly, is that strength speaking, or is that pride dressed in armor? And when in doubt, remember Lincoln, the man who led a nation through its darkest hours by leaning on others, not because he was weak, but because he was wise enough to know that even the strongest men need support to stand tall. 5. I'm too old for that. Now we move into a different kind of illusion. One of the most quietly damaging lies a man can tell himself is this: I'm too old for that. It doesn't always sound dramatic. Sometimes it's disguised as a joke. Sometimes it hides behind practicality. I'm past that phase. That ship has sailed. I missed my chance. But underneath, it's resignation. It's a quiet surrender that whispers, my best days are behind me. And that belief, it doesn't just limit us. It drains the color from the rest of our story. Truly intelligent men recognize this mindset for what it is: toxic, subtle, and soul-shrinking. Because the moment we start closing doors prematurely, the moment we decide that certain dreams are no longer for us, we don't just give up opportunities, we give up parts of ourselves. I once read about a man named Harry Bernstein. At the age of 93, after a long life as a magazine editor and devoted family man, Harry did something most people would never dream of. He sat down to write his first book. It was a memoir called The Invisible Wall, a story of his childhood in a poor English town split by religion and prejudice. Publishers rejected it, again and again, but Harry didn't stop. And at age 96, the book was finally released. It became an international success, translated into multiple languages. It touched lives around the world. And Harry? He went on to write 3 more books. Not bad for someone who should have been too old, right? But what moved me most wasn't the success. It was his courage. The courage to believe that life still had more to give, that he still had more to give, that even in his 90s, he wasn't done learning. He wasn't done growing. He wasn't done contributing. And here's the truth. That courage isn't reserved for men like Harry. It's a choice, a decision, one that each of us faces, sometimes daily. Previously, we saw how age is not a barrier. It's a beginning, a platform for deeper contribution and bolder living. Now the question becomes, Will we let the voice of doubt define our timeline, or will we reclaim our right to act right now? Every day, we face a choice. Do we listen to that quiet, familiar voice that says, we missed our chance? Or do we lean in fully and believe that as long as we still have breath in our lungs, we still have purpose? The Stoics were firm on this. Age means nothing to the soul. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself, yes, death is inevitable, but until it comes, our duty is to live well, to live with purpose, to live with virtue. He believed wisdom didn't automatically come with the passing of years. It came to those who stayed curious, to those who remained brave, to those who refused to let time harden them into bitterness. Because real growth doesn't stop with age, it ripens. I've seen it myself. Men in their 60s learning new skills, launching businesses, mentoring young leaders with clarity and grace, using their years not as an excuse but as an advantage. And I've also seen the opposite. Men who let regret grow heavy on their backs, who retreat from life because they think the best chapters are behind them. Who closed the door? Not because it's locked, but because they believe they no longer belong on the other side. But here's the truth. The difference between these two kinds of men, it's not circumstance. It's mindset. A man who says, I'm too old for that, has already stepped away from the door. But a man who asks, what can I still do today, throws it wide open again. Age doesn't disqualify us from bold living. It empowers us. It gives us more to offer, more experience, more clarity, more emotional strength. These aren't signs of someone who's finished. They're the tools of someone just getting started. And that is the Stoic path. To keep learning, to keep striving, to keep showing up, right until the final moment. Because as long as we're still here, there's still work to be done. Nasha, if that idea stirred something in you, if you felt a quiet yes deep inside, give this video a like. And don't forget to subscribe, because every time I uncover a new way to see life, I want you to be the first to hear it. 6. I'll do it later. Now let's talk about a phrase that might seem harmless, but it quietly buries dreams. I'll do it later. It doesn't sound dangerous, does it? It sounds responsible, even thoughtful, like a promise to ourselves that we'll get to it eventually. But wise men know later is where dreams go to die. Later is the graveyard where intentions are buried under good excuses. Every time we say, I'll call tomorrow, I'll apologize next week, I'll start that project once things calm down. We're not buying time. We're gambling with it. And time, it's the one thing we don't control. Tom. I once knew a man named Thomas. By all standards, he was successful. A thriving business. A beautiful family. Respected in his community, but he was always busy. Constantly pushing things off. He told himself he'd spend more time with his aging father later. After the project. After the busy season. After the next thing. He postponed their fishing trip. Delayed that long overdue phone call. Put off just sitting down for a quiet conversation. And then, one day, later ran out. His father passed suddenly, and Thomas was left holding a phone, full of unsent messages and unsaid things. Previously, we spoke of later, that illusion of time we so often rely on until it's gone. But what happens when we wake up and realize that what we've delayed may never return? He was holding a phone full of unsent messages and a heart full of words he never got to say. Thomas shared this story with me years after his father passed. Not looking for pity, but as a warning. We think we have time, until we don't. The Stoics never sugar-coated this. They didn't pretend we had control over the clock. In fact, they leaned into the awareness of death, not to be gloomy, but to sharpen their focus on life. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." That's not just philosophy, it's practice. A mindset, one that intelligent men adopt because they know the clock isn't in our hands. Time doesn't wait for us to be ready. It doesn't care about our plans, our excuses, our intention to get to it eventually. What we postpone today, we may never have the chance to finish tomorrow. That's why wise men act now. They don't chase the perfect moment because they understand. The perfect moment rarely exists. They make that phone call. They write the letter. They take the first uncomfortable step toward healing a broken relationship, toward starting that dusty idea, toward showing up for someone who needs them, not because it's easy, but because they know the cost of waiting. I've felt this in my own life too. There were conversations I avoided because I didn't want to deal with awkwardness. Letters I didn't write because I thought, there's time, but time doesn't wait. And when I finally stopped waiting and acted, something incredible happened. The weight lifted, the fog cleared, regret turned into clarity. And I realized it's not intention that defines a life, it's action. The Stoics teach us, live now. Live fully, live with urgency. Later is a soft pillow that comforts us just long enough to become a trap. And when we finally look up, it's often too late. The man who acts today, who faces discomfort, who finishes the things that matter, lives without regret. And that is true wisdom. Because opportunity doesn't always knock. Sometimes it just fades quietly while we're busy waiting for the right time. 7. That's just how I am. And now we arrive at one of the most dangerous lies men tell themselves. That's just how I am. It sounds final, like a full stop at the end of a sentence. Unmovable, undeniable. But in truth, it's not certainty, it's surrender. It's the quiet voice that says, I'm done growing. I can't change. I won't try. Previously, we explored how regret often comes not from the things we do, but the actions we postpone. Now let's look at a phrase that doesn't just delay growth. It shuts the door on it entirely. That's just how I am. It sounds innocent, doesn't it? A casual shrug, a tone of finality. A man loses his temper, then shrugs and says, that's just how I am. Another avoids emotional connection, uncomfortable with vulnerability, and tells himself, that's just who I've always been. But these aren't facts. They're not rooted in truth or self-awareness. They are excuses. Excuses that dress up fear and inertia and parade them as personality. But here's the truth. Underneath these phrases lies resistance. Resistance to change. Resistance to the uncomfortable process of self-examination. Resistance to the truth that no man is ever finished becoming who he's meant to be. And the Stoics? They didn't tiptoe around this. They challenged it, head on. They taught that we are not prisoners of our temperament, or our history, or even our impulses. Epictetus said, "It's not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them." Likewise, it's not our nature that limits us. It's the narratives we repeat in our minds, the labels we cling to, the lies we tell ourselves just to avoid discomfort. Change is uncomfortable. Always has been, always will be. It demands honesty. It demands that we ask hard, often painful questions. Am I really like this? Or is it just easier than doing the work to change? It requires letting go of the familiar, even when that familiarity has become a source of quiet pain. But the Stoics also believed something deeply empowering, that self-mastery is the highest calling. Not because it's easy, but because it's necessary for a meaningful life. Growth demands discomfort. It demands commitment. It asks us to choose the harder path, not out of self-loathing, but out of self-respect. Because the intelligent man doesn't change because he hates who he is. He changes because he honors himself enough not to stay the same. "That's just how I am" is not a truth. It's a full stop where there should be a comma, a period where there should be an open door. The Stoics remind us, life itself is change. Nature is change. To resist it is to deny the very nature of being alive. Chisios. The wise man doesn't fear change. He welcomes it. He sees himself as a work in progress, unfinished but willing. And in that willingness, there lies real wisdom. And if you've ever said one of these 7 phrases, trust me, you're not alone. I've said them too, more times than I care to admit. But here's the good news. Intelligent men aren't the ones who never slip. They're the ones who recognize when they've slipped and choose to rise. And that's exactly what we're doing here, becoming better. One thoughtful choice at a time. So let me ask you, which one hit home for you today? Was it, "That's just how I am"? Or maybe, "I'll do it later," before later becomes never? Whatever it was, this is your moment. This is your invitation to take the next step. Because wisdom isn't about being perfect. It's about staying curious, staying humble, and always, always moving forward. If today's conversation stirred something in you, pass it on. Share this video with a friend who's walking this same road. And if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button. Because the journey continues, and I'll see you in the next video.